So hi, this is the October school leadership team meeting at Stuyvesant High School. I'm Mark Henderson, one of the co-chairs. Shivali is over there as well. So the facilitator for today is Ms. Pedrick from the administrator side. But since this is our second meeting of the year, and there are a couple of things that we wanted to just sort of mention as we really begin the work of the school leadership team. The first is just to note that last year was a hard year. It was, it was hard for us in terms of figuring out how the school should run, and we're constantly having to change. And quite often our conversations in SLT got a little heated. And we're hoping that this year that we can try to keep a spirit of sort of inquiry, of trying to figure out the topics and the conversations that are important to us as a community, and to be asking questions and looking for answers rather than to be, trying to convince ourselves of answers that we already think are just the right ones. And we are also, we know this, but it's hard to remember that each of us is here as a representative of a bunch of other people. And that we should, as much as possible, try to represent not just our own ideas and opinions, but all those other people as well. So for instance, Ms. Maggio and I are here as representatives of the UFT, of the teachers in the building. Students are here not just as themselves, but as representatives of all the students, and same for parents. I think, was that all we wanted to say, Shivali? Did you want to add to that?
No, I think that covered most of it. We definitely want the conversations at SLT to be as productive as possible. And part of that comes with entering these meetings with a sense of wanting to hear each other out. And so we hope that this year we're able to facilitate an environment where we're not only presenting our own opinions, but also willing and able to learn from each other. Yeah.
And I think so that said, I think the first thing we need to do today is to figure out when we're meeting, how we're meeting next time, right? Time. This time we decided to meet at 5 o'clock rather than immediately after school. I think for some people it's probably burdensome. And I'm just curious, does anyone, well, I guess the first thing I'm sorry, Ms. Pedrick's not here. Is that what you said, Mr. Yu? So we need a facilitator?
Yes. Yeah, yes. We need a facilitator. Ms. Pedrick is out.
Do we have, is there anyone from the admin besides you here then?
I think Dr. Haber may be here. I think he's here.
Does anybody want to facilitate? Raise your hand. All right, I'll do it. Fine. Look at Maggio. All right, so we need to figure out when we're gonna should we meet at 3:45 next time? Should we meet at 6 o'clock? Should we try to meet at 5 again? Does anybody have any opinions?
I'm happy with 5.
So I think I think we need agreement on assuming that it's going to be remote again. And if that's the case, then I think that the 3 times it looks like it's potentially 3:45, 5 o'clock, and or if there's a later time. I think that's what we need to come to an agreement on, just as clarification.
Ms. Daves? Ms. Davis is on the phone and we do not seem to be able to hear her.
Oh wait, I was waiting to be called on. No, can you hear me now?
Sorry, go ahead. Yeah, say it.
Yeah, okay. Right, I was just, I'm wondering, I'm curious to know if anybody, well, sorry, can't get my words out. So I might suggest alternating if we're gonna do it after school, like maybe one time 3:45 and the next time later. And also was wondering, would it be helpful for anyone if the later time was just a little bit later than 5 o'clock? Maybe 6 o'clock for people who are working to get home.
Ms. Zhang?
Yeah, I would like to ask whether is it still possible to go in person? If not, I think 5 or 6 o'clock, we should be fine.
Mr. Yu, are we able to have in-person meetings?
We can. I think, again, this goes back to trying to make sure that, we're the recordings and the transcripts. I think this is the key thing that we are trying to figure out how we do that in a way, which is why, again, I think we went remote initially because we were seeing whether or not we had the capabilities. And I know that the PA subcommittee, the technology group, was looking and working with Ms. Ingram and Dr. Haber on this to see whether or not we had the capacity or the capability at this point. Ms. Ingram, I don't know if you have an update on that or.
So by the end of this week, we should be at a point where we'll know whether or not we'll be able to have a simultaneous meeting. And then so by the time you have a November meeting, which should be much later in the month, you'll be able to know a lot better. But for planning purposes, at this point, I don't know that you can plan it. I do know that within the 10-day notice that you're required to have, you will know. But today, I could not give you a definite answer on a simultaneous meeting.
Thank you. So could I suggest that we, just so we can get our meeting going, say our next meeting is at 11 is November 23rd. Can we say that will be remote, and then after that will be remote, maybe we can do it a little bit later, like at 6 o'clock, if that's better for Ms. Daves and Dr. Haber and Ms. Yu to be able to get home. Mr. Yu, geez, sorry. And and then in November we'll know better if we're able to do it in December in person. Ms. Daves, do you have?
I was going to say, I don't know if that was a motion, but either I second that motion, if that's a motion.
Great. I guess it was a motion. I don't know. I'm facilitating on the fly here. And so do we have an agreement? Raise your hand if you are in agreement. Next time, 6 o'clock.
We should,
Got 1, 2,
best
3.
to get a second on the motion and then.
Thank you.
Yep.
All right. So next time, 6 o'clock, November 23rd. The next thing, the next order of business on our agenda is the introduction and approval of minutes. And so minutes were distributed initially a week ago, as according to our bylaws, there were a number of changes that you all spotted. At this moment, Mr. Volley is circulating, I think, the updated version of the minutes. But two things to know. One is my understanding of our bylaws is that once the minutes are initially circulated, that we're supposed to do all the changes at this meeting now, so that we shouldn't be kind of adjusting the minutes document before we have this meeting. So what we've done this time is we've taken those adjustments and gone ahead and made them into this document. However, they're highlighted so that we'll be able to spot, so that you'll be able to spot the changes. We need now, though, to read these over because they are different from the initial ones that were sent. And if there are any more changes that need to be made, we should go ahead and do that. So could you take a look at that link and go ahead and if there's changes that we need to make, we'll make them.
Hello. Just one thing. My name, I think it was spelled wrong. Parent 24 Lanzy, Lanzy. Could anybody edit it?
Dr. Haber, or who's Chevalier? Do you have the minutes at this point?
They're Dr. Haber's minutes, yeah.
Okay, so Dr. Haber, did you get that change?
Looks like he's on the phone.
You did not get that change.
I think not only one name is wrong. My name also spelled wrong.
A lot of the names were wrong, and I am very sorry about
yeah,
that.
my name is Haiy, but it says Hair. There's an extra R. So,
Thank you.
so who can edit it? Just because it's not shared to us otherwise.
So Dr. Haber, did you catch that? You're muted.
I requested to be edited, so I can edit
Okay.
if I'm allowed.
I think actually we were supposed to have one person doing it. Yeah. Mr. Yu?
Can I just suggest, Dr. Haber, I'm hoping you can hear, you're on mute, but you should be the one editing since it's access to you, and it'll make it easier if we just have one individual. So can you make those?
Yeah,
do it?
I got the second one, but I need the first correction again. First, I got the Lanzy, that one I have that.
Haiying Ju,
Okay.
whose name has been misspelled repeatedly in our minutes for years, and that's not right. I'm sorry.
Hard name.
Anyone else? Do I have a motion to accept the minutes with those name changes?
Sorry, I have one thing. I found the date is wrong. It's October 18. Is that correct? I think it's 26, right?
Today is the 26th.
Yes,
Thank
but
you.
the on the minute it says October 18. So
Okay.
I think that need to be corrected. And for the spring term, I remember from parents' side is Tracy Zhang, and then now it's Miona Zhang. So it switched, or I just want to make sure, or maybe I remember wrong.
No, let me tell you, my methodology was to use these spellings to the best of my ability. Apparently missed on two of them that were shown on the Zoom. That's where I was getting them from.
It's corrected, yeah. It has been corrected in the, if we click on that link, we should be able to see the updated version. But I agree, on the second page, the date should still be corrected to October 26, not 18.
Great. Ms. Daves?
I would love to see actually the content of what each of the updates were in the minutes, as to opposed to just one quote from each constituency, which didn't really reflect the content of what each of the updates were. Even if it's brief, not a transcript, but just a couple sentences. Maybe those could be redone for next month.
It's possible to go back to the recording, right?
It exists, yes.
Okay. So should we delay the acceptance of these minutes? It seems like there's a lot of changes to be made, and then we'll vote on these ones and next month's minutes at the same time at our next meeting. That is a motion, I guess I made. Does anybody have a second to that?
I'll second.
In favor of making the changes and then voting next time? Ms. Condi? Oh, is that a hand? I think that's a hand. Whew, okay. Wow. All right. So let's keep going. Updates. The principal, I believe, is going first. Principal's update, and then staff, parents, and students is the way we have it on the agenda.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Henderson, and you're doing a great job. Thanks for facilitating. So good evening, everyone. And I know there's been a lot of updates. We've got a lot of things happening end of October and early November. I think a few letters that we have sent out to families. I want to touch on one major letter that came out on Monday, which is around the social emotional screeners and surveys. We sent out a 3-page kind of letter. One was an opening letter, and then followed with 2 additional letters specific to what we're calling the DESA screener and then the Authentic Connections survey. So I just want to talk a little bit about it just to make sure there's some clarification here about what these are. So starting last year, and we talked about this focus on social emotional learning and really thinking about ways that we can find out what's happening, kind of in the school level. So last year we had been seeking out an organization called Authentic Connections, whose primary kind of expertise is looking at high achieving schools. So we had actually started our partnership last year in preparation for this year and really thinking a little bit more about what are the patterns that we're seeing around our school culture, or kind of around how we operate, and again, the things that students are experiencing, as well as what staff also are going through, and particularly since we were coming back from COVID. So we have been putting this in the works, and we're looking to administer this survey. We've spoken with the different individuals or representatives from Authentic Connections. There's been articles that have come out in the New York Times just talking a little bit more about their work and this idea of, again, trying to get some more information about the patterns that are happening within a school. So we are looking to administer that in early November. And while we were planning for it last year, one of the things that also became kind of an update to us is that the Department of Education also wanted to put forth a social emotional screener, which is what we recently got more information on. So there also is a window that the Department of Education is asking us to follow in terms of administering this DESA screener. And so, looking at our timetable, we wanted to make sure that, we were trying to be able to do this in an intelligent way within the kind of constraints and timeline that we're trying to follow. So we sent out this kind of comprehensive letter to families, and we wanted to make sure we offered as much information as we knew around both the DESA screener and then the Authentic Connections. The key piece here is that we think it's important to get information around the culture of our school, again, the things that are impacting, our young people, and really trying to get a better sense of how we can provide support to students. So at this time, the DESA screener, which is through the Department of Education, we have a small team who is getting trained and learning more about how we administer this screener. And again, going through a number of different trainings, which we'll also be doing with our staff on election day, since that is a professional development day and asynchronous for students. This is the first time schools have been able, are being asked to do this. So we're learning just as much as everyone else. And again, I know that there have been questions that are popping up, and and our goal is to seek more information so that we can try to answer those questions. At the time, we don't have as many answers, but what we're trying to do is get that as much as we can. And then with the Authentic Connections as well, I think this is something we've never done before, but again, this is something that we sought out as a school to administer, because we think it's going to be important to look at the institution based upon the perspective of young people and staff. So with all that being said, we want to provide as much information as that we had available. We also wanted to make sure that families were aware that they could opt out of either the screener or the survey, or both. And what I would say about this is, again, I know that people are asking questions to make that determination. We're going to get back to those who've asked questions. We'll also try to provide as much more information, pertaining to the questions that are being asked of us. But I think one of the key things here is there is a focus on social emotional learning. Depending on what instrument, again, we think, or you think as a family, is you feel most comfortable with. We want to make sure you have that option. But I think the key thing here is, one is through the Department of Education. We are still learning more about it because the school has to administer it. The school staff has to administer it to students. And again, a lot of that is through observations and through our relationships that we have with young people, whereas the Authentic Connections is done by students. And again, I think the key thing here is we don't want to make the decision for you in terms of whether or not you want to opt out or whether you want your child to participate. What I would say is, it is important to get enough participation so that the data is credible and as accurate as it can be, so that we can use it to help us make some key decisions around the school, particularly or as it pertains to social emotional learning, overall student experience, as well as just the things that we think would be good for Stuyvesant as an institution. What I would say is this: I wish I could say more about the DESA screener, but in transparency, we are learning more about it through the trainings as we're going through it as well. So we can't necessarily answer the immediate questions yet until we're continuing to get a better understanding. We haven't been, this isn't something that we've done before, so it is something that we are being asked to do, and we'll do our due diligence and try to get as much information so that we can then convey it back to families to make decisions. What I would say about the Authentic Connections High Achieving School Survey, what I want to say about that is that we sought that out. We felt it was important that we would get information about our school and student perspective, staff perspective, and we sought out this organization because we thought that it would help us get the information that we need. So I wanted to just lay out a little bit of the distinction in terms of
I'm in the SLT meeting.
in terms of the social emotional instruments that are being asked of the school, and which again are going to impact our school community. But it is important that we get participation in this, and again we're going to use the information for the benefit of the school. I know that there will be some questions, and again our team will do our very best to make sure that we answer as many questions as we can, so that you can be informed in making the decisions that you need to make. I know that the opt-out deadline is coming up very quickly, so again we're working as quickly as we can to try to get as many many answers to the questions that are being asked, so that we can convey that back as soon as we can to families in order for you all to make the decision. All right, and then some other things that are coming up. We have an administration of the SAT, and we're putting out information around AP. So I'm going to ask Dr. Haber just to give a brief update on both of those, just so that folks are aware of kind of the communication that will be coming out.
Sure, thank you, Principal. So on Thursday, this Thursday, the 28th of October, we'll be administering the SAT to seniors who have not yet taken the SAT. It's a small number, and as a result, we'll be able to run classes almost exactly as we normally would. As far as the AP exams, we'll be opening the registration portal. And what I mean by that is the registration portal for the payment of the AP exams. The registration itself is done by each student on the College Board portal, and the student chooses whether or not they're going to take the exam after they sign up for the AP classroom. So the information is being released, and we'll start having that registration process. And the emails that I've received, most of the inquiries have one theme in common, and that is about what used to be called the AP waiver, which we changed the name now to the AP exception. This is an AP exam that a student will take that they're not in the class for, they're not in that AP class, but they're allowed to take one AP exam outside of that, and we're calling that now the AP exam exception. And we'll have a form where the students will apply for that exception. It'll be reviewed by the assistant principals or the department chairs, and also determine that if we have enough space based on the numbers of examinees we'll be using. From there, they'll be notified by giving a join code, and they'll be able to sign up for exam only. This all will, within the next couple of weeks, this will be completed. And just a reminder that there are some courses that are only given in the spring, and those courses have a separate a separate registration, the spring registration, spring AP registration. That'll be at the beginning of February, same as it's been. So there are some people who will not be able to sign up for the exam at this time because they're not in the class at this time. Okay, Mr. Henderson, that's good. And
Great.
any questions?
Anything else, Mr. Yu?
Yep. Two more things, just really quickly. The end of our marking period 1 ended last Wednesday. And so we're preparing to get the grades ready for marking period 1 so that we can distribute report cards on November 1st, which is a Monday. Just quick note so everyone is aware, marking period 1 is on the report card. These are not permanent, meaning that they're not on the transcript at the end of the semester, at the end of the third term. So just again, this is essentially a progress check, but I wanted to make sure we clarified that. This will not, the grade that a student receives on the report card, which will be distributed on Monday, is not the grade that ends up on the transcript. We do that at the very end of the term. So just again, wanting to clarify that. And then finally, just want to put on everyone's radar, parent-teacher conferences for Stuyvesant are scheduled on Monday, November 15th from 1 to 3 p.m. and then on Tuesday, November 16th from 5:30 to 8 p.m. Information is forthcoming to you later this week, and again for about how to sign up, but just wanting to make sure that everyone is aware that our dates for parent-teacher conferences are different than the citywide dates, and making sure that everyone is clear on that.
Great. Anyone with a question for Mr. Yu? So I don't. All of the regular members of the SLT get to speak before alternates, which is weird.
Sure, I understand.
Sorry. Yeah. And now you're speaking, Ms. Yu. Ms. Yu, are you there?
Oh, yes, I have a question regarding the screening.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm wondering, so who designed the questions and how do we know that the staff who are qualified to do the screening?
Yeah, let me, so the DESA is called the Devereaux Student Strengths Assessment. It's a group that works, it's I think Aperture. So this is the tool that's being used. And as I mentioned before, we have a small group currently going through the trainings to better understand how to administer it as accurately as possible, recognizing that, again, even in the trainings, recognition that there could be bias in the ways in which we try to figure out how we can get as best information as possible. And so we're working with the staff on election day as well to do some more training or to do some training for staff as well. The fact of the matter is this is something that we're learning. And again, our understanding of the screener is this isn't information that's going to be used for grades or anything else beyond the fact that it's an internal way for the school to get more information about each individual student. And again, I think, just in full transparency, I don't know exactly, again, how accurate it's going to be, but the goal here is that we're answering questions pertaining to student strengths in a way that, looking at staff who have as close of a relationship that we can consider, to be able to try to provide that information. But this is something that we're learning, and the goal here is to try to get as much or get as accurate information as possible. Mr.
Shaffron?
Thank you very much, Principal Yu, for actually talking about it, because it was really good to see both going out and the information, particularly information about the option for the families to opt out. I think there was you possibly already aware, I think, put together in one letter and one survey created a bit of a confusion and kind of among parents when they viewed both. And after having certain opinion about DESA, some responded in the same way to authentic connection, while the two have very different goals, as you rightfully pointed out. One is The first one is just more about assessment of specific student. The other one is more about how to make things at Stuyvesant better. So it's very, so I appreciate any clarification that you made today, and anything else maybe as a follow-up that could be separated out, further commented on.
Yeah, I would say, and I appreciate that, Mr. Shaffron. I think, we're taking a look at the form itself in terms of, families who may have opted out, and taking a look at see what patterns we're seeing, as well as looking at some follow-up. The DESA screener is much more time-bound than the authentic connection. So again, we will be doing some follow-up just to provide some more clarity in case exactly what you said occurred and people kind of lumped it together. But that is good for us to note.
Ms. Metzler.
Thanks. Just very briefly, so Principal Yu, on the DESA, you talked about trying to get a full picture of school culture as a result of this process. I'm just curious, to what extent, the teachers are also going to be included in this. I just know that, when we at NYU, they did this thing called One NYU, and they surveyed both staff and the faculty as part of the process, in addition to the students. And unfortunately, they didn't get to the alumni, which I thought was unfortunate. But and then the second question I had for you is just, in doing this DESA survey, do we know if Aperture, other uses the data that that are going to be allowed from us participating in this? Do they compile the data more broadly with other schools and compare schools, and do we have control over how they use our data?
So let me answer that second question first. And this is a question that people have been asking. I think things been circulating about that very thing. It's like, where does this information reside? Who's got access to it? And this is a question we want to try to get more clarification on, because ideally, again, it has not been as clear about, who gets access to it, and ultimately, like, how long is it kept? All of those different things. And as I mentioned before, like, this is the first time we've, schools have been able to, or are being asked to do this. So there are lots of questions that are being raised that we're sending back to figure out what information we can get. It's our understanding that this will be internal for us to be able to take a look at, and us meaning the school community, and particularly the school staff, so that we can think about what supports, because we will, based upon our understanding of the way it's going to operate, the information that we get then essentially gets tiered in terms of looking at kids who may need additional supports, and for the school to then figure out what those resources may be and what those supports may be. Now, who's got access to that? I mean, again, that's what we want to make sure we're getting a better understanding of who will have that information. One thing to take note with the DESA screener, again, students, these are through observations of school staff based upon, specific certain questions around student strengths. Whereas and it's only done in terms of observations of students, individual students. The Authentic Connections High Achieving School Survey, students will do, fill out the survey. We also have a staff version as well. So again, trying to look at more comprehensively. And again, this is one of the reasons why we partnered with Authentic Connections, because this is kind of their wheelhouse and their expertise. And again, I think the one kind of the distinction that I would say between the DESA screener and then Authentic Connections, the DESA screener, based upon our understanding, is much more individual, because we're doing it for every single student, trying to complete the screener for every individual student. Whereas the Authentic Connections survey, it's more of an institution through the lens of students and staff. So answering these questions, but looking at what are the things that we see in terms of patterns of, based upon the information that we're seeing at the school level. So again, that's exactly what we wanted, because we want to figure out how we can, what changes and or adjustments can be made that's under our control, that's more at the institution. So, again, I think this is kind of our starting point, and we were, just kind of thrown a curveball, because we weren't necessarily aware about the DOE screener until, earlier this year. And so again, we're trying to kind of follow through on the things that are being asked of us, while also trying to do things that we think are the things that we had already been planning for.
Ms. Ju?
Hi, yes. I have one more question. So, where can we see the screening questions before deciding whether or not opt out or opt in?
I mean,
So
I can give you like two examples of some of the questions just so that people can get awareness, because again, the goal here is through from the observations, and from my understanding is like we're not showcasing all the questions. That's through the trainings that we've learned. But like, for instance, it says, does the student take an active role in learning? Or do they try to do their very best? Like, these are the types of questions supposed to be very strength oriented, and then for us to make observations and then determine it based on a Likert scale. So never, rarely, occasionally, frequently, very frequently. Again, the thing that I want to make clear is that none of the information from the screener is connected to grades or to coursework, any of that. It's our best judgment based upon the individual who's making the kind of evaluation to make their best determination on certain questions around student strengths.
So thank you all. We are now over time for all of our updates. So what I'll ask is, for the next updates, can we maybe go a little quicker? I mean, these are questions I think a lot of us have about the survey, so that's great. And why don't we save all the questions for after the staff, parents, and students do their updates. I also want to very quickly just say, I've been told Ms. Ingram is attending today as an alternate for DC 37, which means she's able to speak more than normally, or at least legally, and that Sophie Zhuang, I believe you are taking minutes for today, right? Great, thank you. Staff? Ms. Daves?
Yes. I have two items to share update of what UFT has been doing. One is the UFT has assembled the consultative committee for this year. The consultative committee is composed of teachers, counselors, lab specialists, essentially any UFT member is eligible for it. The group is smaller in size because it's a committee. The purpose of the committee is to give input into school policy that affects teachers and counselors and so on. So we had our first meeting, and then we have another one scheduled for mid-November. We meet monthly with the principal, and then between those meetings, we meet amongst ourselves to prepare our agenda for our monthly meeting. The second thing that's been going on is our MOSL committee has been formed, and we met once. The MOSL committee is the Measure of Student Learning Committee. It is also composed of staff members from various departments, but it also includes APs. The purpose of the committee is to determine some decision points around how the Regents exams are used as part of a teacher's rating. Every single school has a MOSL committee. Every single school also has a consultative committee. Last Friday, the MOSL committee met and made some course-wide selections, and then in November we're going to meet again to talk about teacher level selections, and that should probably be wrapped up at the end of November for the MOSL committee. But the consultative committee will continue to meet monthly. That's it.
Great, thank you. Parents, Mr. Sheffrin.
Thank you. A couple of points on our end. We are making great progress with fundraising, better than last year. So huge thank you to the families, but we still have very aggressive budget to help schools. So that's a thing. We had a kickoff of the wonderful Hamilton raffle, which is full steam, had a really great start with that. So again, thank you to everyone who supported. Thank you so on October 19th, we had a PA meeting with the coursework overview by APs, was really, really well received. Anyone who missed it, we have a recording, but again, thank you to APs and the faculty for collaboration on this. And Dina, thank you so much for organizing this for us. We actually are really excited about November PA meeting. We have we have a topic that never fails to bring attendance: college. So we actually have the infamous essay guy coming in, who will be talking about to students about and families about the best essay ever. Couple of other things. The PTC, actually our committee, our faculty reception committee is preparing and working on the grab and go lunch. So we're really sad we cannot offer the usual faculty reception the way we usually do it, but the committee is hard at work. We actually followed up on some of the conversations we had about the SLT and how to better represent parents' voices during the SLT. And so for that, as part of our e-news, before the SLT, we have the special rubric that goes out with the specific call for some additional feedback for the reps that we are sharing among the grade representatives. So this is really good. We are actually working closely with the administration. We have a meeting tomorrow to discuss the funding priorities for school, and that also, we really love how strategic some of these conversations are across parents, alumni, and schools. So this is really, really good collaboration. We actually, November 1st, we are getting together with parents interested to support independent research for school. So we have a special initiative this year to be more active in supporting this great initiative. So both with labs and mentoring and other things. So, it was really, really good to meet with school representatives on this topic. And then last but not least, our appropriation cycle has started, and we basically November 10th is the deadline for the appropriation grant submission for the PA, and so this is both for teachers, faculty, and students. So please make sure that you don't miss that deadline. I think that's all that I wanted to mention. I mean, there are a few other things, but I think that's the core.
Great, thank you. Students.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. I'm Shivali. I'm the student union president. And as we approach November, I think we are all realizing that STI students are getting very involved in their academics and kind of feeling the workload increase. So our main priority has been in ensuring that there's a balance of academics with also the more fun extracurricular aspects of Stuyvesant. We are continuously supporting clubs and hosting meetings and events. Just to highlight a few exciting things that have been happening this week, STC, which is the theater community, they're hosting their fall musical on Friday and Saturday. Arista is continuing their one-on-one tutoring. So if you ever feel like you need some extra support in literally any class you can imagine, whether it be a language class or a history class, it's a really great opportunity to get support from students who have actually experienced that class. And we have like around 20 interest club meetings happening every day after school. So we've been super happy to see everybody involved and get to see that like after school environment that we really missed last year. And then another one of our priorities has been bringing back events and traditions that we have always done previously. So we've been really grateful to have a Boogram fundraiser, which is basically part of our like Styloween celebration, where you can send messages and candy to students, which is going to be distributed on Friday during homeroom. And we're also doing a spirit week this week. Today was Decades Day. Yesterday was Pajama Day. On Friday, we're doing a Halloween costume contest. So students will show up, students, faculty, anybody can show up in Halloween costumes, and we will be voting on our favorite. And then last Friday, we hosted the pep rally, which is a really big success. The football team had their homecoming game. And before the homecoming game, we had a faculty versus students dodgeball game. We had some student performers, and it was very well attended and a really great way to end the week. So yeah, we've just been very excited to see everybody back in the building and bringing back part of the culture that we really love at STI beyond the classroom.
Great. Yay. Any questions? Any questions for all of that? Mr. Sheffrin.
I'm sorry, I'm going to jump in. I actually forgot one important thing is that we had, I know, but I will be quick. We actually are actively working on the infamous Spring Feast planning. We were still planning to make it in person. And one thing that is really due on November 1st is our logo contest. So if any students or parents are doing this, that's the opportunity, not only to leave your legacy with that, but also to get a $50 card. So something to mention. Thank you.
Thanks. Any other questions? Well, I guess we can move on to the actual first thing on our agenda after updates. Yikes. So Ms. Coleman and Mr. Lee are here as I believe the first ever dedicated special education teachers at Stuyvesant. Mr. Yu, did you want to say anything before they talk?
Yes, just a quick framing. So again, want to thank Ms. Coleman and Mr. Lee, who are our two special education teachers, who are going to give you a broad overview of just the work that's happening at Stuyvesant. And again, I think, one of the things that we want everyone to walk away with is, again, we've got exceptional students across our entire student body, and almost everyone has, different learning needs. And so one of the things that we want to continue to make sure of is that, again, as we look at special education and making sure that we give the overview and a broader understanding, because I think there's some misconceptions as well. And, Ms. Coleman and Mr. Lee provide that to our staff, and will continue to be ongoing work. But I think this is really important work and really making sure that the school community gets a broader understanding. So I've been really happy with the progress. There's a lot more work to do, but I think we're really on the right steps in terms of really looking comprehensively at our entire student body and the ways that we're serving young people. So I'll hand it over to Ms. Coleman and Mr. Lee.
Thank you, Mr. Yu. I'm just going to share our slide deck. So Ms. Coleman.
Hello. So Hing is going to be in charge of all things technological, because that is what works best for everyone. So he's going to go ahead and explain the QR code that he made.
So in true to our name, we want to provide multiple means of asking questions, whether that is asking questions now, later, or perhaps storing it in a future form. So given the spirit of the pandemic, we wanted to use a QR code as our means of accessing. Don't worry, there will be one at the end of this presentation as well. So if you're quickly getting your phone now and trying to scan it, don't worry, it'll be there at the end.
Okay, so before we begin, I do want to frame this conversation about special education and twice exceptional students and neurodivergence in a broader sort of perspective about equity. So obviously Stuyvesant's commitment to equity and the equity initiatives are significant, and definitely I feel that being brought on board was definitely part of those initiatives in equity. And oftentimes we don't necessarily talk about neurodivergent advocacy in terms of equity, but it is very much that, and it is intersectional. It relates to all other sort of equity work, and we're very happy to have that as part of STY's focus right now.
Before we continue through the presentation, I think it's a good idea so you all know who we are. You know us by name, but a little bit of story to humanize us. So Ms. Coleman.
Hello. So I've been in the Department of Education for 12 years. I've always had this role. I've always worked as a special education coordinator and special education teacher. And I've always worked specializing in 2E students. And we will talk about what that is in a moment. But that has been my work, specifically ages 12 to 18. I've always worked with an older population because they've got very specific needs around 2E and around special education.
And hello, everyone. I'm Hing Lee, Mr. Lee, you can call me. I have a dual certification in both social studies and special education. I arrived at Stuyvesant in January 2020 as a leave replacement for the social studies department. I was teaching US history and then later went on to teach economics and AP US history. And during my time for COVID, I helped a lot with the technology integration here. And although this isn't really mentioned in the slide deck, some of you students may be happy, but I'm a STY alum. So I know the trials and tribulations that many of you have gone through, and maybe one day I'll also be a Sty parent. We'll see.
We just got very ambitious. And then 2 members of our special education team that are not present but are very important in the work that we do. Ms. Burke, who is one of our school psychologists, and then also Arlene Novaris, who is our school social worker. She's fantastic, both are. Ms. Novaris does a lot of counseling with all of our students, but definitely our 2E population. And then someone that's actually not on here, but who we have started to work with more is actually a school psychiatrist, Ellie Feinstein. She comes in for very particular aspects of the special education process. So I think I've said 2E maybe 15 times already. So it's probably a good idea that we actually talk about what that is. It is a term that is gaining popularity. Younger people actually really prefer to use it. And it is definitely gaining popularity in educational environments as well. So 2E is an abbreviation for twice exceptional. And in a school that is not Stuyvesant, basically about 10% of the special education population would be 2E. But at Stuyvesant, 100% of the special education population is 2E, which means that yes, they have a diagnosed disability that is recognized under IDEA, but they also are intellectually gifted. And that is why we often talk about neurodivergence. And in my opinion, neurodivergence is actually the most accurate term to talk about the population at Stuyvesant, because we have incredibly gifted individuals who also have one of the 13 categories recognized under IDEA. And it's really important, and I always really stress, the individuals that we're talking about are performing at the absolute highest levels of their courses. You know, they will go to the best universities. They are extraordinarily gifted. And it's how those two things interplay with each other, and what special education support has to look like for that population, because it looks very, very different than it would in a population that was not 100% 2E, the way that it is at Stuyvesant High School.
And one way to help visualize that idea is that we decided to just give a rough breakdown. If given the statistics, given the numbers, because I know how much we all love numbers and data, we broke down if the total population of Stuyvesant High School had the higher range of statistics, and this is a low estimate actually, that a low estimate of Stuyvesant High School students, we would have about 280 students who are dubbed twice exceptional, who may have a disability that falls under one of the 13 categories, and they perform at a high academic level. Now, this also applies to staff. This also applies to anybody who works in these concentrated fields that tend to harbor and tend to teach gifted and talented students, especially those who come to our school.
And one thing to understand about diagnosing 2E individuals and why it can look so different than what we might think of as conventional, special education models is it really is a matter of divergence. So if you have a student who is in the 99th percentile or 98th percentile, very superior range in most forms of intellectual functioning, a neurodivergence might just be that they're in the 60th percentile for one aspect of intellectual functioning. So it's still above what would be considered the average among their peer group, but it's neurodivergent because they are scoring so high in other categories of intellectual functioning. And that does definitely pose all kinds of diagnostic challenges because these individuals are performing at the highest level. So unless someone is paying really close attention, they might not realize that in one aspect of processing, rather than being in the very superior range, they're in the high range, because they're still in the high range, but it's a neurodivergence because the vast majority of their intellectual functioning is so heightened. And that is one of the more difficult things to sort of translate when you're thinking about this. A lot of our students do not get diagnosed until much later than other students in special education service programs because they do so well academically.
And there's this misconception amongst people that if you are doing well academically, you must not have one of these disabilities, which is not true. That's why the term twice exceptional, which is I think the 30th time we're using it. The term twice exceptional is used to describe these specific students who may get 99s, 95s in their class, but they might also have a reading disability. And to help understand what we do, what Ms. Coleman and I do as special educators, we have a specific role to help all the teachers in the school. So Ms. Coleman?
Yeah, so there is definitely a lot that a special educator does that a general education teacher does not do. We support general education teachers, and we're going to talk a little bit more about what that looks like in a moment. But we are the ones who deliver special education support services. We are the ones who facilitate different programs. I teach with Mr. Henderson. Mr. Lee teaches with a bunch of teachers on staff. He's waving. We have like more fun than we should. And it's fantastic. So we get to do all of that work. And then there's obviously the portion sort of covered under IDEA, where we are, managing individualized education plans. We are doing specialized progress reports, meeting with families, facilitating related services like speech and language therapy, occupational therapy. We meet with the audiologist who comes to Stuyvesant, because Stuyvesant is one of the few schools that actually has an audiologist who comes. We also have a hearing specialist and a visual impairment specialist. So we coordinate with them and make sure that all of the programs for our individual students are whole and what is called fully met, basically meaning it's fully implemented. And we do all the paperwork that goes along with that and all the scheduling that goes along with that as well.
And to help Stuyvesant adjust to this time frame, there's a lot of things that Ms. Coleman and I do for general education teachers. So for instance, during the first, I think we're on week 7 now, during the first 7 weeks, we had an open door teacher stop by. We also have open emails. Teachers send us emails, and we talk about all the students who may benefit from special education services. So for example, one way we could support the students with disabilities is provide or structure guided notes, which is a way of note-taking where students have a structured format on what they should focus on and how they should focus on it. There's also executive functioning checklists. The P word that all Stuyvesant students know is called procrastination. These skill sets, these checklists, are designed to help students stay on task and identify what they need to do, organize their task, prioritize which task, and manage their time. There's graphic organizers. There's different ways that learners interpret information. Some are prefer visuals. Some of them prefer manipulatives, which are things you use your hands and actually doing stuff with their hands. Some prefer organization, and graphic organizers help them. There's also checklists. How many of you have ever received a large assignment and you're like, man, this would be a lot easier if this was broken down into separate parts that I could manage one at a time? These are things that we can help with. We also want to plan activities for diverse learners. This doesn't mean the students who are at the bottom. This means all students, right? Differentiating across all levels. We could help scaffold lessons to make sure that there's a basic building blocks that students could have a solid foundation, and then they add more, and we add more as they become more confident and stronger in the materials. We also coach and conference with teachers to help specify what a student's need might be or what a student's disability might be, and explain what supports they need. One example is we use the term preferential seating in the legal documents called IEPs, otherwise known as individualized education plans. That way, the language can be complex to someone who may not have been experienced to it, but our role is to help make the information, like our job, as accessible as possible to the general population.
And Mr. Lee mentioned this, but Stuyvesant is unique in that a lot of our scaffolding, we are scaffolding up often. So a lot of our 2E individuals are this year, it's different every year, but this year we have students who are exceptionally gifted in math. And so in math classes, we're actually scaffolding up often because human brain is a wondrous thing. And oftentimes, if there is an area of processing difficulty, the brain will compensate by creating an area of significant strength. And our students, our freshmen this year in particular, we are seeing that strength in a very pronounced, profound way in math. And another year, it might not be math, it might be another class, but this year, that seems to be the direction that we're heading. So we work to scaffold up often as well. The one thing I think, yeah, the one thing I did just I wanted to have like a little bit of a brag moment. I just wanted to say that though our program is working with a lot of challenges this year throughout the Department of Education, we don't have enough speech and language therapists in the Department of Education this year. We don't have enough occupational therapists. We are definitely dealing with a lot of logistical challenges. As of the November 1st reporting date, Stuyvesant High School has the highest special education compliance rate in their program services, meaning that we in the district, we have the highest number of individual students who are receiving the full faith of their program already. So we are a few percentage points away from 100%. We're going to get there so soon. And I'm just very excited about that. I was thrilled when we got a shout out at the borough office level. So we are working very, very hard, and we are working with our families to continue to sort of meet a bar that we will continue to raise. But I think we're doing a great job, and I hope that we continue to do a great job.
Thank you. Mr. Yu, do you have anything to add, or shall we open it up for questions?
No, why don't we just go ahead and open up for questions? I'm sure we can.
Okay, great. Maybe I think everyone who wants the QR code has probably got it. Would you mind unsharing? Great. Does anybody have any questions or comments? Ms. Diaz-Carr.
Hi. First of all, thank you so much for this presentation. I really appreciated it, especially as a student representative, we thought it was like really useful. So one question that I have is, I know that society at large, but especially at Stuyvesant, there's sort of a stigma surrounding, asking for help. And so we're wondering if there's a way that students can get diagnosed as 2E at Stuyvesant, and like what that would look like. Would they need parent consent? And what would this process look like? Could students reach out to you guys for help with that?
Absolutely. So a couple of things. One, I think you're acknowledging something that is real, which is a hesitation around sort of talking about what can feel like academic struggles. So I definitely can see that as a challenge for all young people at Stuyvesant and at other schools as well. The process of being diagnosed with one of the sort of 13 categories recognized under IDEA is definitely a complex one, and it takes months, and it is definitely involved. And it involves some of the other team members that we introduced at the beginning of our presentation, and the process called a neuropsychological evaluation. And it is a process that takes some time, but it is a process that is very much available to students. It's definitely one that is done in partnership with parents through what is called a parent referral oftentimes. A student who is over the age of 18 could absolutely do it on their own, but students younger than the age of 18 are encouraged to do it in partnership with their parents. That being said, you can always talk to your school counselors. You can absolutely talk to either myself or Mr. Lee at any point in time, and that's a way that we can start the process as well. Luckily, there's not one way and only one way that it can be done. There's many, many ways that it can be done, and no matter which way it happens, it definitely begins with communication. So the thing that I would want all students to know is that it starts with their voice. However it goes from there, there's a lot of different paths, but I want all students to feel really open about communicating those things, because there really are quite a few categories. Autism spectrum disorder is one, specifically in female students, where there isn't necessarily a lot of communication around those things. So yeah, I think my big message to the student body would be, to encourage open communication about their learning experience to the adults around them and in partnership with the adults around them.
I also would like to add on to address the stigma component, is that special education doesn't necessarily mean that there's a deficiency in a field. It can mean that students have excellent strengths, and the idea that being part of special education puts you as inferior to others is a misconception that a lot of people have. And instead of trying to bring down others to a level like, oh, you're inferior, you're less, we should all, and this is across the board, see what strengths that we can all bring to the table. I'm really good at computers. Miss Coleman asks me all the time for help. She's really good at she's very good at the management needs of special education. She has been my mentor. We play off each other's strengths, and I want the students to be kind to one another, to be compassionate, to laugh, to get more than 7 hours of sleep. You all know the drill.
Ms. Ju?
Yes. Yeah, I want to take this opportunity to thank the two teachers for the presentation. It's very helpful, and to raise the awareness. It's so surprised to me to know that there are 6 to 10% of the student population. That's very high. And also, the presentation showed that our school is not only a place of learning math and science, but also a place full of care and love. So children with special needs can get enough attention and care in school. That's really good. So I hope we can have more open conversation about it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. I'm sorry, is it Shui?
Yes, you pronounced it very well. It's Xue, and you can just call me Lindsay. Thank you again, Mr. Lee and Ms. Coleman, for this presentation. And I really appreciate that you helped not just 10% of our 2E students in such style, but also I believe Mr. Lee mentioned the approach or the science behind it that can also help other students, right? I know a fact a lot of students have this procrastination problem with their homework. Not just kids, like us adults have the same problem. I wonder if you can help our teachers and our students to, teach us some kind of method to overcome this problem, because this really affects students' life, affects their sleep, their mental health, right? So yeah, I wonder if there's something you could help us.
I'm so glad you brought that up, because when Mr. Yu was envisioning this program and we were really sort of talking about what we wanted in the broader future of the program, it was absolutely a conversation of how we can bring these things to all of our students. And it's already started to happen. I mentioned Mr. Henderson and I teach together, and the work that we do it's for all students in the classroom, and it's for all students in freshman composition. And I know Mr. Lee's approach is very, very much the same. And we are doing a lot of professional development already. The entire staff sat in on a much longer talk than the one we just gave, bless their hearts. They really listened for a very long time, but we've already started full staff professional development, and we have started to, it's sort of like growing the influence of the program. But our philosophy is very much that it's for everyone. And if it can benefit one child, it can often benefit many, many children. And that has been our approach from the start and will continue to be.
Mr. Schaffer?
Thank you so much. This is a fantastic presentation, really, really helpful. I think it's a great sort of kickoff for the broader audience on this topic. So really appreciate having it on the agenda. And this is not a question, but just kind of more a comment. We're really looking forward to have you partner with the special PA committee of the diverse learners that we've started last year. So I think this is just a great opportunity. So hopefully they will get an opportunity to meet with you and their co-chairs and kind of figure out what could be done next, both specifically for those families and any educational programs and et cetera. So thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Dr. Nehrudek-Moore.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Okay. I had a question about the procedures for exams for teachers. I mean, the way I'm giving exams this year is a little unconventional, but it used to be leave it in an envelope in a lockbox. Is that still the way it's working, or have there been any changes? I'm just curious because last year it was sort of upended with the remote, and I just want to know, kind of for teachers and parents and students to know like what changes or if everything is status quo, because I didn't receive any communication about that.
So currently, you should still have that yellow envelope, I believe yellow envelope in the mailroom. Still proceed to do that. In the event that there is any difficulties, please reach out to Ms. Coleman and I so we can address anything specific. Every student is going to have a different set of circumstances. So I think if we address them individually, assume that you're going to do what you normally do, but if there is a challenge, for instance, please let us know and we'll address it accordingly.
Great. Thank you both for being here, and thank you so much for what you're doing. I agree. The work that we are doing in class is for everybody, and that is useful. I hope you guys get to get in as many classrooms as you possibly can. If there's nothing else for Ms. Coleman and Mr. Lee, I think you can probably leave unless you want to stick around for the rest of our time. But you can sort of think that one through. And Mr. Yu, and then we'll move on to our next thing.
Yep, I'll keep it very quick. Just one last thing. As we talk about special education, diverse learners, all of that, the one thing that I want to continue to preface, and I think Ms. Coleman and Mr. Lee said this, this isn't any deficiencies or us minimizing our rigor or any of those things. I just want to make sure that people are clear on that. It's ways for us to work with all students and all types of learners, particularly in how they learn, as well as the way that they demonstrate their learning. And I think it's a really important distinction. Again, I don't want folks to think that we're dumbing this down or any of those things, which things that I've heard in the past, not just, not at Stuyvesant per se, but just in general, when people think about special education. And I think this is a reason why we wanted to make sure we're, again, providing more information so that, again, there isn't misconceptions or misunderstandings about the support that we want to give all students, and particularly those, who again have certain needs, both in how they are learning as well as the ways that they're demonstrating their learning.
Mr. Lee?
I just wanted to exit on this note with Ms. Coleman and Mr. Yu and all the points that were shared, that we want you all to extend a hand to one another, make sure to sanitize it beforehand, but we want you to be kind to one another ultimately, that we are going to notice that people are going to struggle, and we will struggle. However, we all have different strengths, as we mentioned earlier, and if we play on each other's strengths, we can come out better than before. All right, you guys got this.
Do we all need like a break for Kleenex now? Are we all like sad, happy, moved? Or shall we move on to our next item on the agenda, which is feedback on virtual platforms. Ms. Daves, I believe this was something that you had wanted to have it on the agenda. Do you want to kick it off?
Sure. Yeah, sure. So as all of you know, that we are now all using Schedula, so it's easier for parents to know where to look for grades, and students have all their grades in one place, and the school, anyone at the school can quickly see how a student is doing. But I thought that anytime you roll out any sort of new technology, sometimes there's little hiccups here and there, and I thought a discussion might be in order to make sure to see if there are any issues from different points of view, or if everything's just going great, and get feedback from all the constituencies on that. So I do have some things to share. I've been getting some feedback from teachers. I do have some things to share, but I'm happy to have other groups share first if they want, or what do you think, Mr. Henderson?
Well, I know you have things, so that in the interest of starting someplace,
Okay.
why don't we start there?
Okay, could I share my screen? I don't think I have.
Ms. Ingram, is that doable?
You're muted.
Ms. Ingram, we can't hear you.
Sorry, I'm talking while I'm muted, but Ms. Daves, you should have the ability to share now. That's what I was saying. Are you able to share?
Yeah, I am. I just clicking the right buttons here.
No worries.
So on the positive side, you know, from a system level, Scheduler has integration with ATS and STARS. So it's easy to move data around. So if a student switches classes, that student would like populate pretty much immediately in the new teacher's class. From an administrative view, one can get an overview of student performance and grade books. From the teacher perspective, the attendance feature is just amazing. It's very easy to execute. There's no need to drop off bubble sheets. This is an attendance feature we have dreamed of for years and years and years, and now it is finally here. And anytime I run into a teacher and I say, how's schedule going? Attendance is great. From the counseling perspective, because we are at one grade book, it's really easy for a counselor to see how a student is doing overall instead of having to go to, say, Jupyter and Scheduler and check or check in with the individual teacher. So that's absolutely fantastic. And so there are lots of positives to Scheduler, and the feedback that I've been getting from teachers is that this really was a trade-off in their eyes, in that we have these positives here, but when the teacher is the one that's interacting with the software daily, multiple times a day, and this is some of the feedback that I've gotten from staff that I keep hearing over and over. And it's in comparison to something that we used, which was Jupyter. And also to give some context here, in that Jupyter does not integrate with ATS and STARS, which is actually a problem if we want to move the school forward from a systems level. And Jupyter is, they've asked, they don't integrate because they've asked the DOE for the ability to get the API specs so they could integrate, but the DOE has not responded to them. So it seems if we want something that's going to integrate with ATS and STARS that makes certain processes happen faster, that right now Jupyter unfortunately is not an option. But there's some loss from the teacher side for us to do this. With Jupyter, we could get tech support within the day, usually within a couple hours. Now it's the average I've spoken to teachers, it's 2 to 3 days. The labor involved in grading is much greater in schedule, and maybe Mr. Henderson and Ms. Maggio could speak to that too. Maybe, you know, do you guys have anything you want to add to the labor and grading part?
I think you're actually reading off of the second slide you have, but I'm seeing the first slide.
Okay. That's interesting. It didn't refresh because I'm looking at the second slide on my screen. No? Interesting. Can you see it now?
No, it's the same.
That's
okay. Just read it.
Okay. Let me try one more time.
Yes, that works. Yep,
Okay.
that's
I
good.
don't know, somehow the sharing lost. Okay. So I'll just go through these and I'll ask, I guess, Mr. Henderson and Ms. Magic if you want anything. So the labor and grading is much more with Schedula. And so then that would take, there's only so many hours and minutes in the day. And so that kind of takes away from other things. The other thing is that in Schedula, as a teacher is typing the grades in, it's visible to students, but it might be that the teacher just, after inputting all the grades, decides maybe they're going to curve some, an individual assignment. But what happens is the students will see what the data entry is before the curve is actually applied. And so that's a little bit misleading to the student and parent end. But in Jupyter, you could input all grades and then you could reveal it to the class. In Schedula, if a student submits work, a teacher is not alerted that something came in, where in our old system, there'd be a little blue star when you logged in, and then oh, I need to grade something. And that's especially important if we have students that are out and submitting late work. That's an issue. And there are, some other issues on here that you can't see all the student grades on the screen at once. And so sometimes you want to see what's missing, and it's very hard to see that. So, from the teacher's perspective, the feedback that I've been getting, and I remember Mr. Henderson saying at the very beginning that we're here as representatives of our constituencies. And this is something that, these are things that I've been hearing from many dozens and dozens of teachers. I don't know if there's a solution at this point because the other system isn't integrating with ATS and STARS. So then the question is, well, I don't, what could we do next? So I've worked with the UFT to get them to try to work with the DOE to see if they can get some Jupyter integration. Because I think that that's a system that teachers at many schools use, and it would be nice if all schools had options of 2 instead of having to go to 1. And then the other thing, I just asked some questions surrounding training. And so the training needs of staff would be around IO assessment, some more understanding around the curving options, and some more clarity around absences internal to Schedula. So that is where we are with Schedula and the teacher perspective. Mr. Henderson or Ms. Maggio, do you have anything to add?
Ms. Maggio, do you want to add to that?
We are having a difficult time with Schedula in biology. So as a department, we talk about this quite often. We have had issues with transferring from Google Classroom, with time management for us on it. And we were a huge component of online grading from the very beginning. The bio department has been online and online grading for quite some time. And a pattern that I'm just seeing is that we're actually seeing less feedback getting back to students. I can tell you on my end, absolutely, is that because the email function in Pupil Path is really bad, that I'm no longer emailing through there. I'm emailing my classes now through Gmail. And if any of you were parents in my class ever, you know that you got the weekly announcements and you knew everything that was happening in my class. And none of my freshman parents this year have gotten any of those emails or the daily updates. So they're no longer as in the loop as they used to be. And I went into this because I've been on online grading for 16 years. So I went in this with really like, I am going to give it a shot and I am going to, but it's just not been as handy or useful as what we've had in the past. And it's just a shame because I feel like this year, especially, my students aren't getting the feedback and the parents aren't getting the communication that they had in the past. And that's across the board for bio, because we talk about this every day.
As I think as facilitator, I'm not supposed to really call on myself, but I guess I am. The English department actually has slightly different concerns, which are, when we first started using school-wide, like playing with the idea of a school-wide grade book a couple of years ago, we wanted to make sure that it didn't create added stress on students by having like sort of too much access to really granular, like every single, daily assignment, you're just sort of waiting for the grade to show up. And so at the time, a couple of years ago, when we first started using online grade books, we talked about systems such as like not having them update every single moment, but maybe every couple of weeks to have them update, so that it wasn't like, so that students weren't focused on that like tiny little percentage change instead of the sort of like larger sweep of learning and of, and then of evaluation. For me, there's like a lot of limitations that come from using Schedula, and that like, I can't use letter grades, which I would prefer to use because they, I'm grading an essay. I don't want to have to figure out the difference between a 93 and a 94. And I don't think students want me doing that either. So anyway, it's limiting in a bunch of ways. It feels to me as though it's something that we have sort of moved into without considering the kinds of effects that it might have on students to have constant granular access to a percentage. And that's my feeling about it. Now I'll be a facilitator again. Dr. Nedrick Moore?
Can you hear me? Yes. Okay, so I'm an absolute Jupyter novice. I started using it as the result of the pandemic. Miss Reep, who retired from here a while ago, showed me how to use it like on the fly. And I was syncing it to Google Classroom, and I really started to like it. I don't use it the way Miss Maggio does. She's like a Jupyter powerhouse. I'm much less so. But I found the user interface in Jupyter to be pretty impressive. Comparing that to my experience with Schedula, there are some features that are great, but largely it's awkward. It's time consuming to fix mistakes. Like if you do something like I can't sync the grades. If I do multiple syncs, I have to go in and delete in a very sort of awkward way. There are a lot of things about, I understand the benefits, but there are a lot of things about it that are time consuming to the point that it makes me less excited about engaging with it than I was with Jupyter for a lot of reasons. And I just wanted to put that out there from the perspective of someone that hadn't been using Jupyter that long, but had been using Google Classroom for many years.
Thank you. The teachers have been saying a lot. Anybody from other constituencies have things to add? Ms. Diaz-Carr?
Yeah, some things that we've noticed in the student end. Well, first, I'd like to reiterate the point that it's a lot harder to have conversations via PeoplePath. In Jupyter Ed, it was really easy for us to send a message to our teachers and to get an email back quite frequently. And also the email that would be sent to us in Jupyter would also be sent to our sci.edu. So if we weren't logged into Jupyter, we could see it. And there's no feature like that on PeoplePath, which has been, quite stressful. I also know that other students, their teachers have been trying to drop a grade, but for some reason where it says like drop lowest grade, that function has been turned off. I don't know if that's like an administration thing, if that can be fixed, but a lot of students and teachers in my classes and in my friends' classes have been sort of worried about this. But yeah, I mean, overall, I think that this experience with PeoplePath has been, generally, as is with Jupyter, students are always checking every single day
whenever there's online grades, they're really stressed out. But if there are like just a tiny few changes to the system, I think that it would be useful for all constituencies.
Thank you. Ms. Metzler?
Thanks. So as between Jupiter and Pupil Path, or I guess as I call it Pupil Path, I've had both at all the schools my kids have attended. And from a parent perspective, I'm agnostic between the two, just for the record. However, I did notice on the agenda that it was both commenting on Pupil Path and on Google Classroom. And that's the one thing that I find challenging, which is, so, you know, in the interest of full transparency, I've really had to help my son adapt to these new systems. I think he wasn't aware, for example, that there were different tabs that he could click on. And so he was like missing large swaths of information because he didn't realize there was a tab. So I've had to sit down with him and help him figure out, oh, look, Ms. Maggio posted a rubric, which I don't even think he saw for the first two projects. And now we figured out where to find the rubrics. So, but my point is that I think sometimes what happens is that Google Classroom is listing the assignments contemporaneously, and then they don't really show up in Pupil Path for a couple of days. So you end up having to look at both. And my brother-in-law gave me this nice advice ages ago, which is like, he promised his son he would only look at it once a week, since people were referencing sort of the stress of the minute to minute. And I would like to adopt that eventually as a parent, but for now, because I'm just trying to help him adopt to the systems, you know, we're looking at it together every day, but it is a real adjustment, and it's maybe just something to consider from the admin perspective that, you know, helping these kids get used to these, I mean, like, it's part of life. Like, I'm constantly figuring out new systems every day in my life now, but I do think it's a little bit of a growing pain for when these things are new, as it sounds like it has been for all the teachers too.
Mr. Shafford?
Thank you. I mean, first of all, I have to say that from the parent perspective, having one system and not multiple, it is so nice. It is so nice. So, and I know I you know, over the whatever numerous number of years I've been with Sci, that was kind of a thing that came up many years ago, and I'm glad that we're there. So I'm hoping that we will continue there, and it's just a question how to improve the system and whatever, or to pick the right one, whatever the decision is. But I actually really appreciate the transparency and the feedback. This is really good to know. We've certainly heard some of these things from parents, and we also heard that in some cases, some teachers were so frustrated with the system that they kind of unofficially started using Jupyter for certain purposes. Again, it's not a complaint. We understand. We really would like teachers to be as effective and having the right tools, so that makes total sense. One thing that we hope that school, or maybe that's where our technology committee help, or maybe, you know, maybe administration can look into ways to do it, is to basically see what is the next step in integration. Yes, there are all this functionality, but between Google Classroom, which also continues developing, and the whether it's Pupil Path, or what is really the efficient and effective way to integrate the systems to create the best experience, both for students, for teachers, and to give parents the right way? I think that's a question that would be great to sort of start thinking of. You know, we've heard that Google Classroom now offers some other things, other, you know, grading abilities and et cetera. And last but not least, I think, and Dina, maybe you actually offered it during one of our conversations, but I think it may be a good idea to actually help, you know, even create sort of a rubric or some event for parents to help them navigate some of these systems that we have at Stuyvesant, because you know, it's getting there. So I mean, again, we'll take it offline and maybe discuss.
Shivali?
Thank you.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I want to talk a little bit about Google Classroom, but I also want to say that with the grading systems, I appreciate that we only have one. I think last year, for me at least, I had a pretty even split between half of them using Pupil Path and half of my teachers using Jupyter, and that was extremely confusing as well. So whatever platform it is, I just appreciate that we have one this year. When it comes to Google Classroom, I wanted to talk about the frequency at which it's updated, and how that like impacts students. I mean, even today, I don't know if many people were in the building, but we've been seeing a lot more students absent every single day, whether that be for like health reasons or just general absences. It's also been very chaotic in terms of catching up on material. Some students are out for 2-3 days, and they're forced to like catch up on all this material by messaging their friends or receiving like social media group chats. I wonder like how we can ensure that Google Classrooms are being frequently updated with class material. I think it's super difficult from what I understand, because some teachers like to lecture, some teachers have PowerPoints, some teachers have worksheets. So there's so many different ways that you can lead a classroom, but it would be very, very helpful if we had some standard as to how frequently Google Classroom was updated and what information was put on the stream. Yeah, I just wanted to put that out there if anybody had any other thoughts.
Mr. Yu?
Thanks. I wanted to hear all the feedback, and I appreciate everyone being as transparent. And so I just want to kind of contextualize some of this. I mean, what you all are bringing up are all the complexities that we're dealing with. One is one grade book because of the different systems that we're seeing, just because of technology and the ways that education is moving. So one, I think that is something, again, that we're still going to grapple with because there's no system at this point that provides all the things that we want. I mean, remember, we still also have Talos, and again, we're playing with Google Classroom, Pupil Path, and those aren't even including the apps that, again, many of our teachers may be using as well. So we're moving in the right direction and trying to figure out what is the system and/or systems that will work for every constituent group. And again, I don't think there's going to be anything that's going to be 100%, but this is the understanding that we're trying to work towards. The other thing too is, again, and this is why we've worked closely with Ms. Daves and the UFT. There are certain limitations and certain kind of restrictions and requirements that we're following. So Google Classroom is considered a digital classroom and one of the approved platforms. And so again, this was trying to build off what happened last year, which was majority of folks were remote, and then that was kind of the vehicle in which we were conducting classes. That's not the way that we're doing it this year, but recognizing that we still have situations where there may be quarantine, as well as absences. This is the work that we're working with Ms. Daves and the UFT to figure out exactly some of the things that you're bringing up, Shivali, around cadence in terms of making sure things are updated and the vehicles in which we're reaching out and working with students when they are absent. I wish there was a simple answer. There isn't, but this is all why it's so important to get the feedback and to hear. Again, from the administration side, we're trying to think about the systems that work on a number of different levels, whether that's Pupil Path or whether that's Jupyter Grades. We are in the infancy of kind of the growing pains, because there's a lot to learn about each of the systems to see what are the capabilities, as well as understanding which of the vendors are going to work with us to make any adjustments that, again, that need to be made. And and something that I'll say too is, like, we're fortunate that we have Talos in one way, but and because it's been very customized for us, but even Talos has its limitations. And so this is what we're seeing across the board around kind of over-reliance on systems while also trying to get the systems to meet the needs that we have. And so we're going to continue to look at this and examine this about what's working, what's not working, where the changes that we can be made. Teacher perspective is really important because, again, we are talking about time, but we're also very, considerate about what students are receiving, as well as what families are seeing. The big move is that we went to one grade book. Whether Pupil Path is the right one or not, we'll see. But what I will say is that we're going to continue to explore and investigate. We do want to do our due diligence and seeing what the capabilities are, and it will mean that there are growing pains and things that you might have been accustomed to last year or with other systems, may not be the case for this year. But please know this is why we're having an open discussion, why we want to listen, and then see what leverages we do have when it comes to, again, any of these grade books or vendors. And then lastly, I will say this, the other key piece as we're talking about it, and again, whether or not we can make this happen is, all of this was a question like, what's ATS and STARS? There are other systems that most students and families don't see, and most teachers don't see as well, that are also like really integral in all of this. So again, we're hoping that there will be integration across the board, because we do need it not only at the individual level, but we do need it at the systems level. So in closing, we are going to continue to explore, and let's continue these conversations, because we do want to see what is going to be the most appropriate for Stuyvesant moving forward. But the intent is that we'll continue to work with one grade book.
Ms. Ingram, did you want to speak briefly on Mr. Shaffron's point?
Yeah, just going back, I'll be really quick. So we were thinking, Mr. Shaffron mentioned about sessions. We were thinking of having sessions because it's very difficult for everyone to, for everyone, not just parents, to navigate all of these systems. As Mr. Yu mentioned, that everyone trying to learn all of these systems, we've grown comfortable perhaps with maybe one system or two that we've learned. And unfortunately, though, when the students and the parents are having to navigate all of these systems, especially the new students that come in and the new parents, they might become overwhelmed with having to learn so many all at once. And so they don't have a base of knowledge coming in from previous years from some of the systems that we used to have, and then just building on it. So they have all of the systems all at once to have to navigate and track and learn. So they have all these places that they have to log into. So it's really considerate to try to limit some of the systems that we're trying to use. And going to one grade book was really a blessing, as Mr. Shaffron said, for a lot of families and students. So it might be uncomfortable for us temporarily, but we're really trying to do as many sessions as we can. We're going to try to schedule them just to teach people how to use them. Even Talos, we've had it for a number of years, but it's new to the people that just get here. So we're going to try to do as many sessions as we can, just and to provide support to families to try to navigate the systems that we have.
Ms. Daves, you had originally brought this topic. Any last thing we should say before we move on?
No, I'll just add that I think teachers understand and are supportive of going to one grade book, and how that is very beneficial for parents and for students and for the whole community. And I appreciate Principal Yu listening to some of the concerns, because I just don't feel like there's been a space and for all of the different constituencies to get together and talk about it. So.
Great, thank you.
No, it's a very complex problem. Thanks.
It is. So why don't we move on to our next topic, homeroom curriculum. And I believe some of the students, do we have
Yeah,
Shivali, did you want to start?
Yeah, I can introduce and then I'll pass it over. So we're really excited because we are lucky to have the Big Sib chairs attending with us to present a very quick 5-minute discussion on the next topic, which is homeroom curriculum. The Big Sibs will talk about who they are and what they do, but homeroom is an issue and a topic that comes up very often at Stuyvesant, and they had some ideas they would like to propose as to how we could improve it and or make it more valuable to students across all grades. So I'm going to pass it over to the chairs who are going to introduce themselves.
Yeah, okay. So hi, I'm Saida. I'm one of the 5 chairs. There's only 3 of us presenting today, but yeah, I'll let the other 2 introduce themselves. And then Ms. Ingram, can you pull up the presentation as well?
Yeah, hi, I'm actually Aaron, not Andrew, but it shows up as Andrew on this webinar, and I'm one of the other Big Sib chairs.
And I don't know if Alec joined yet, but he will hopefully be able to join soon. If not, Alec is also another Big Sip chair. The other two are Sam and Daniela. Okay. So yeah, we can go to the second slide. All right, so I'll just quickly go over who we are. So as I mentioned, right now, only 2 of the 5 chairs who run the Big Sip program at Stuyvesant. We help with the underclassmen's transition to Stuyvesant. So anything goes from like advice about time management to, you know, when they receive their report cards, just giving them some help to like, you know, understand that you know, you won't get the same grades that you did in middle school. There are 150 Big Sips available to all the little Sips. There are 6 Big Sips in each homeroom, but at any point in time, little Sips can reach out to any Big Sips and even us, the chairs. So, so far what the Big Sips have been doing or have participated in was Camp Sty, which was hosted prior to the start of the school year, and every homeroom the school has hosted so far. So the Big Sips, as I mentioned, play a key role during homeroom time because they help distribute important information and items and try to have as many school-related conversations as possible with the underclassmen. So usually the Big Sip program only caters to the freshman class, but this year we decided that we would also help the sophomore class, which was last year's freshman class, because we felt that after 1.5 years of remote learning and this return to in-person learning, still with like, you know, the presence of COVID and all the restrictions that we do have, we felt that it was important to still help out the underclassmen that go in 9th grade and the 10th grade. So yeah, next slide, Mrs. Singh. So now we just quickly want to show you all what the homeroom schedule looks like. So this is just the first 4 periods of a homeroom day. As you can see, there's 40 minutes dedicated to each class time compared to the 41 minutes. So that's not too big of a difference. But between periods 3 and 4, there is a 12-minute interval dedicated to homeroom. And then you can go on to the next slide. So we wanted to discuss some problems that we did see with this model. Generally, we just feel that in the 12 minutes that we have for homeroom, there isn't any time to do anything meaningful, whether that's students who would like to get some work done in the middle of their day or take a nap or just anything. But as chairs, our main concern is the time that Big Sips and Little Sips have with bonding, which is a main thing that really helps underclassmen get adjusted to Stuyvesant with that relationship with upperclassmen, being able to ask for advice or anything that they may need. Yeah, so during those 12 minutes, usually Big Sibs are just handing out information, or, you know, this Friday they'll be distributing boograms, which will probably take all of the 12 minutes, which means they won't have that much bonding time as they would hope, or just, you know, any in-person kind of experience with their little Sibs, because not many or at all any underclassmen have any classes with their Big Sibs, so they don't really have that bonding time outside of homeroom time unless they do any clubs together. And also other students that might be worried about, some upperclassmen just don't feel like homeroom is very efficient way to spend their like time in between periods 3 and 4, so they might not want to go to homeroom. And, you know, because of that like small period of time, they're just like, you know, I'll do something else. And so in general, homeroom feels very scattered, infrequent, and unpredictable. And next slide.
Yeah, so how do we propose to improve this? So one way is to make homeroom more meaningful. And that could be, in our opinion, to introduce like a homeroom curriculum for different grades. So for example, instead of having guidance push-ins during freshman bio classes, we could have that during homeroom. And this could introduce pertinent information like time management, study skills, and organizational tips. And this could also help to involve Big Sibs by allowing them to share their own anecdotes and advice. As for upperclassmen, they could also have college counselor push-ins instead. So what could also be beneficial is allowing extracurricular push-ins led by student leaders of clubs and organizations during this period as well. For example, the environmental club actually held valuable homeroom push-ins to teach students about recycling properly during the first week of school. And we thought that more clubs can and should utilize this opportunity. And I guess homeroom can also be used as a study hall, perhaps, or even as a time for an office hours for students to visit their teachers. Next slide. Thank you. So another way we can improve homeroom is by extending the duration of homeroom to at least 20 minutes or half a period, and the frequency of homeroom to bi-weekly or more often than that. And something very valuable that we did this year is having homeroom every single day for the first week of school. And we thought that this should be something that should be continued going forward because it really helps to transition underclassmen to high school by giving a lot of time for big sibs to form bonds, especially in that first week of school. Another benefit of more homeroom time, obviously, is that students can do meaningful activities, whether it be starting homework, studying for tests, eating a snack, or bonding activities with their big sibs. And speaking of bonding activities, over remote learning last year, the Big Sib program did something called homeroom mix and matches, which allowed for multiple homerooms to combine into a single Zoom conference to get to meet one another. And Stuyvesant is just so big that you may graduate without even meeting half the students in your grade. So with longer homeroom times, we could implement in-person mix and matches where perhaps different homerooms under the same guidance counselors could meet up in the auditorium or in one of the lecture halls. Not to mention, but for many students, especially upperclassmen like myself, homeroom may serve as the only break between classes. Some students have 6 to 7 periods of classes straight without break or lunch. And so homeroom can be that one very helpful period, if not necessary break in their schedule. However, we propose that homeroom could even just be integrated into our daily schedules because there are things such as morning announcements that could really seamlessly transition and fit with homerooms. So rather than taking up class time at the start of third period every single day, morning announcements could even just happen during homeroom. Yeah, next slide. Yeah, so in summary, we just believe that the current homeroom model we have is not the most efficient, and there's a lot of room for improvement in making homeroom much more meaningful. We think just currently increasing the frequency and even the duration of homeroom can be really helpful because homeroom is just this 12-minute interval right now that is often just used for distributing notices. And by allowing homeroom to be much more of a routine in Stuyvesant life, it can allow for a lot of more valuable, meaningful experiences for students for all grades. Thank you.
Thank you. Maybe if we can maybe stop sharing so we can see each other. So, sorry, my cats are being fed right now, so that's what that noise is. Are there questions? Are there comments? Right now there's hands up, but only from alternates. I just want to make sure that. Okay. Thanks. So Ms. Zhang.
Hi, can you hear me? Sorry, yeah. Oh, I completely agree with the students' proposal, extending the homerooms and make homeroom sessions more meaningful. I'm all for it. I think so. Yeah, I think we had some discussions last year talking about how to promote social-emotional learning for the students, and this is one of the things that we actually were thinking as parents. Yeah, because the homeroom teachers can actually have this regular opportunities to get in touch with students and engage some smaller group of discussions out of the classroom curriculum. So we think we can continue to brainstorm what kind of topics will be more meaningful to utilize that time, and then totally leverage the big SIBs. Sharing experience, anything, bonding. Yeah, I'm all for it. I think, my son has been, now I'm talking about my own experience. Like my son has been in Stuyvesant. He's a junior, but he still think he's a freshman. He doesn't know. He only has like 5 friends. So I think this bonding, especially, you know, this is post-pandemic, I think the bonding with the rest of the community is very key to these kids, this group of kids. That's my 2 cents.
Thank you. Shivali?
Yeah, I wanted to thank the Big Sibs for coming on SLT and presenting. I also just wanted to echo something they said about frequency and duration. I am a Big Sib myself, and something I've noticed is that in its current form, the 12-minute periods don't really allow for us to have a valuable conversation, activity, or discussion. So I agree that we should make homeroom more frequent in our schedule, like if it were every 2 weeks as opposed to like once randomly every month. That would also, but I think if we do it every 2 weeks with 12 minutes, that kind of defeats the purpose of homeroom anyways. I think if we make it more regular, we also have to increase the time. And so it allows us to, for example, juniors and seniors might find it more valuable to use it as a study hall period, maybe have college counselors come into the homeroom, do discussions at that time. Underclassmen might find it more valuable to meet with their counselors, talk about like organization, procrastination, productivity, things like that. I think there are variant things that each grade could get out of homeroom, but once again, in its current form, we aren't able to get that. And then the other thing I want to talk about very quickly was homeroom teachers and the role they play alongside Big Sibs. I think it would be great if homeroom teachers and Big Sibs had more of an opportunity to get to know each other and like work together while leading homeroom. But I also do want to emphasize that I think homeroom should be a Big Sib student-led activity because I think there's a lot of power in hearing advice and in getting activities led by other students. Yeah.
Ms. Daves?
Yeah, thank you for coming and sharing that presentation. That was really, really nice. You know, one thing to think about in terms of planning, in terms of, say, a push-in by counselors and things. I'm not quite sure. Maybe Miss Brandon, you could tell us, how many counselors do we have? Did you hear me? I don't know the exact number off the top of my head.
Ms. Brandon, do you know how many counselors we have on staff at the moment?
Can you hear me now? So we have 12 school counselors. Each counselor has 2 homerooms with the exception of Ms. Paris, who has 3 homerooms.
So, you know, in terms of logistics, you might have more homerooms than counselors to be able to do the push-ins.
Well, that's what I was going to bring up when I get a chance to speak.
Yeah, right. So it just seems based on a logistics issue that it might almost have to be it would have to be most of the time the homeroom teacher leading it, with maybe, you know, if there was a counselor to come in on some sort of rotating basis, you know, they could pop in a couple times a year, but I think staffing is an issue. That's just something to keep in mind.
Ms. Brandon, why don't you continue your thought?
Okay, so I'm speaking, you know, as a school counselor. I know, first of all, thank you, Big Sibs, for sharing. I am an advocate for more homeroom time. However, it is difficult for the counselors to lead homeroom activities because I have 8 homerooms, so I can't be in 8 places at the same time. I know many times when we do have homerooms within those 12 minutes, I am running from each floor to go speak to my homerooms, and I'm usually out of breath, and sometimes I don't get all my homerooms just to convey messages, like introducing myself, if they need anything, or just important messages. So I hope that they do realize the importance of homerooms and either to expand the time or the frequency in it, so at least the counselors can go visit their homerooms in person and just speak with the students. Someone brought up the idea of having the college counselors also having an opportunity to go visit their homerooms. I think that's a great idea. But again, with logistics, it's about 25 homerooms. and not enough counselors. So it's something that maybe the counselors and the homeroom teachers and the big SIBs can work together, but being led by the big SIBs, I think is an awesome idea.
Mr. Sunwoo?
I think Miss Ned Whittick-Moore was Dr. Ned Whittick-Moore was before me, so I don't want to take away that space from her.
Thank you.
Can you hear me? All right. You can hear me, yes, nod. Okay, good. So my being an alum gives me some sort of wide perspective on this. When I went to Stuyvesant, it was homeroom every day. And it was that way for as long as I can remember. That used to be standard, you know, way back. And when I arrived at Stuyvesant to teach, it was once a week. And then at some point it got scaled back to whenever. And I don't really know exactly how that happened. I think it had something to do with apportionment of instructional time and the number of minutes in the day. That's an administrative thing that the administrators have much better perspective on. But that was the trajectory, and I think that was the reasoning. Now, one of the things I've done to counteract that is set up a Google Classroom so I can communicate with my homeroom. Another thing I've found, having sort of gone through the years with homerooms, is that it's really hard to get to know my students. Even when I'm giving them away at graduation, I only know like maybe half of them because I see them so rarely. So those are some of the constraints. That's the history. Also, we talked about this last year and we wanted to make the homeroom more intentional. And we want to engage the SIBs in all of these sort of facets that they're talking about, which are really sort of well thought out points. But the logistics, if it's infrequent for any sort of organized sort of homeroom class or homeroom curriculum, it's just really hard. So it has to be more frequent, it has to be a little longer, but there's a trade-off, and there was a pushback among the faculty for the loss of instructional time. And that's why it turned into this infrequent thing. So I just wanted to give that perspective. Thank you.
Thank you. So I just want to note that we are over our allotted time at this moment. But there are, I think, 2 comments left on this topic, 3 comments left on this topic. And Ms. Maggio is doing all kinds of weird hand signals. I don't know what they mean. So Mr. Sunwoo, I'm sorry, but technically I'm supposed to call on Ms. Daves first, even though I called on you.
Just to move this idea forward, like it might be interesting if the big SIBs like had a Google sheet and like, let's just say you had like 2 homerooms a month, 10 months, that's 20 homerooms. You divide the Google sheet by class, freshman, sophomore, junior, senior, and then you populate that with possible ideas for what could happen at different homerooms and then come back and present that. That's all.
So are you suggesting a sort of a sample or like a almost, yeah, like a sample schedule?
Yeah, just as a starting point. What would you like to see?
Okay.
I mean, it's up to them if they want to execute that. It's just an idea I'm throwing out there.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. Big SIBs, you can let us know if that seems reasonable. Mr. Sunwoo.
We would. Oh,
I'm sorry.
Yeah. Sorry about that. We would love to come back and present our thoughts about that. We think it would really help convey the importance of homeroom.
Okay, great. Mr. Sunwoo.
All right, yeah, I'm gonna make this super quick, just out of respect for everyone's time. I am all for this. I totally think that anything that benefits the students, I'm all for. I'm just my only question, and I think this is not something to be answered now, and not something that I necessarily want to ask anyone now. But it's just a question for thought. Is just like, with what regularity would this happen, and with what regularity would this happen, and what would be most beneficial for the students, and also what would be most beneficial for the teachers as well. Just a question, but definitely don't need that answer now. Just wanted to put that out there.
Great, thank you. Ms. Brandon, your hand is still up from before, right?
Sorry.
Okay. Ms. Maggio, did you have something to say or not?
I wanted to ask everybody to come see the musical this Friday and Saturday in the lobby.
That's wonderful. My belief, I believe, Ms. Ingram, that there are no observer comments right now.
They are not in attendance.
Okay, so that has been the marathon October meeting of the school leadership team. Thank you very much, everybody who's in attendance. We will see you, I think, November 23rd at 6 p.m. again, remotely over Zoom. Bye.
Good night, everyone.